Hi pals, welcome to Page vs. Screen, where I take a look at stories that have been adapted from the written word to the silver and small screens to see if anything can be better than what was on the page. Today, we're making our final moves across the board with another look at Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass to try to take the Red Queen and win the game. Our format is simple. I tell you about what wasn't so great about the film versions and what made me go. I look at how accurate it is, if any changes made sense, and how entertaining it was to determine which did it better, the page or the screen. A lot of people know what happens in the two books, but if you're somebody that doesn't and you are sitting on a wall waiting for the 3-minute download to start, well, you're gonna have to go and check out part 1, aka the
Off with their heads!
edition, because this here is the 11 Impossible Things Before Breakfast edition. If you've read Through the Looking Glass, you'll see what I did there. Anyway, I'm picking up the rankings from where I left off in part 2. In the Curiouser and Curiouser edition, I took a look at adaptations that were good. They were good, but not as good as the books. Well, today, friends, it is time to look at the best adaptations that I could find. Which, there's quite a few adaptations. It felt a little impossible to find really good ones, but in the end, I did it. Now I'm just going to make note again. I'm using the original ranking system from when I first started doing Page vs. Screen, because when I first set up the Alice videos, I did it on the numbered rankings. So if you go back and check out my installments of A Christmas Carol adaptations, I went with tiered ranking for those, and that's what I'm going to continue to do for anything else after I'm done with this video, regardless of how many entries there are. Okay, it is time to meet the Red Queen for our first move. For that, we start with a two-way tie for 10th place. The first one is Dreamchild from 1985. This one isn't a true adaptation, and well, I don't really think you can say that the movie is inspired by the stories overall. Those, some of the characters are shown, but I also can't say it's a biopic, even though it's set in the real world and it focuses on parts of Alice Little's life. But yeah, I don't know how to classify it myself. Somebody else probably will, but I don't. So for that, I don't have a lot to say about it. It's 1932. Alice is 80 years old, and she has sailed across the Atlantic with her young carer Lucy for a celebration at Columbia University for Lewis Carroll's centenary. It dives into the speculation that Dodgson, aka Lewis Carroll, had romantic feelings for Alice, and so she's dealing with reporters and gossip columnists while trying to confront things that happened to her in childhood. We see flashbacks to various interactions between her and Dodgson when she was a kid, and also a point where her mom finds letters that she burns because they are not appropriate. As far as I know, they're not explicit, but they do insinuate certain feelings that they're definitely not appropriate when there's a 20-year age gap and one person is 10 years old. When she's alone, she hallucinates that Dodgson is there, and then we get into actual Wonderland characters when she thinks that she's at the Hatter and Hare's tea party. She gets a visit from the caterpillar, also the mock turtle and griffin. Those are the only links to the book. The characters, they criticize her because she's gotten older, stuff like that. Otherwise, yeah, that's there's nothing with the plot. There's really nothing that links it to the book. It's just tangential and more so because of the real life repercussions rather than stuff that was fiction. Despite its limited connections to the actual books, because again, that's not what this movie was meant to be, I really like this one because it explored the possible real-life repercussions of the books and how it could have impacted Alice Little's life beyond just attending the centenary, which actually did happen, BT dubs. The movie was very well done. It entertained isn't the right word, but it held my attention, and not in a bad way. So seriously, go check it out. As I said, this one tied for 10th. So we chug on through Queen's 3D to meet the D to 1985's Dumb, the 1915 version, which is the last of silent films featured in my list. What I liked about this one is that it was the first to include both Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. Unfortunately, last I knew, sections of the film are missing, so I can't give a proper anything on the full thing. But of what there was, it was super accurate aside from the first few minutes. At the beginning, it shows Alice and her sister walking around outside, and she sees things like a pig, an owl, and a cat. They're all things that, she sees in some form in Wonderland. So it's kind of a setup to link, what she sees in Wonderland to what she sees in the real world right before she falls asleep. It was kind of interesting, to see that kind of setup, but at the same time, it's silent film format. And the longer setup to things for an adaptation of these books where quite a bit happens, and the adaptation is only like 15, 20 minutes long. I don't know. I think the film could have been utilized better, to show more of the story rather than other random shit. This one does show the lobster quadrille instead of talking about it, which I liked. I mean, I typically prefer that across the board, and since it's a silent film, it worked too much better for the format than having like a title card put up for it and then like moving on, which is easily what they could have done. What I did think was weird, though, was showing that she was dreaming by doing this. I really do think it's better when there's ambiguity to that aspect until the very end. I mean, showing it this way wasn't bad, but how it was done in the book was it was really well done. So let's not mess with what actually works, okay? Despite my criticisms of it, this one was really good. I mean, very entertaining. Before I started doing page versus screen, I always thought that, silent films would be really boring. But the more I watch early cinema, I find that's not the case. It can be really good, on par with modern films a lot of the time. And like really, remember my very first one, Oliver Twist, a silent era adaptation took the top spot. That surprised me. The White Queen's show firmly hits us in the face as we continue to cross the board by checking out the universe of Once Upon a Time and its too short-lived of a spin-off, Once Upon a Time in Wonderland, at number 9. Now, I'm lumping both shows together as one entry because it would be just too much to separate them, and there's extended crossover between the two shows, and in that one of the Wonderland spin-offs main characters is one of the big secondary characters in the main show, was present in both. So if you don't like that, well, this is my channel. So I make the rules, and my rules say that I can't. So deal with it. Also, full disclosure, Once Upon a Time is a show that I've watched what feels like a million times. So yeah, though I didn't watch the Wonderland spin-off until I was watching stuff for this series of videos. If you're not familiar with the Once Upon a Time universe, they take fairy tales, folk tales, legends, myths, classic lit, stuff like that, and they kind of turn them on their heads like Snow White is more than just some damsel. She's a bandit that, is really good at archery and knows how to handle herself with a sword. And there's more to the characters than what we see in most versions of their stories. So, with something like this, it's really cool to see how they incorporated elements from the source material into their world. Like its parent show, Once Upon a Time in Wonderland is a mashup of multiple stories. I mean, the main focus is on elements of Alice in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, as well as Disney's interpretation of Aladdin, with a small smattering of Robin Hood, Cinderella, and Rumpelstiltskin all like thrown in the blender. The Aladdin stuff, not the main focus of this video. If I ever dive into like fairy and folk tales, then Aladdin might actually get done. But they're a whole different bag of tricks, and yeah, I love them. I love them. But I don't know how I'd approach doing it for like this type of thing at the moment, so that's kind of like put a pin in that. Okay, on to the Alice related stuff that they did. Unfortunately, even though he was established in Storybrooke in the first two series of the main show, the Hatter isn't included in the Wonderland spin-off. The actor, Sebastian something or other, he was doing some other less popular project, I don't know, something about Marvel or whatever. Anyway, we get a bunch of other characters between the two shows. I mean, it just wouldn't be Wonderland without Alice, who is our fifth of the main cast of the spin-off, anyways. We get to see the White Rabbit. True to form, he is always worried about people being late. He's kind of stuffy, but he can also create portals between the realms, including the land without magic, by way of digging a rabbit hole. And that was a fun way to bring that aspect of the story into things. It's how he gets Will from Storybrooke and Alice out of Bedlam, or differently even if it wasn't Bedlam. I mean, we see that she's been committed near the beginning of the show, just because of what's happened to her. Mirrors are also used as portals to get to Wonderland a couple of times between the spin-off and the parent show. So it was fun to see how both types of portals were included. It's kind of like in various shows and movies of Arthurian legend, you're kind of curious to see if they're going to include getting the sword both from the lake and from the stone somehow. And so when shows find a way to include both of Alice's transportation methods, it's really cool. And of course, if we're going to have creatures from the world of Wonderland, the Jabberwocky crops up. Now, most of the time, taking the Jabberwocky from the poem to making it an adversary annoys me. But I don't know, this time it just made sense to me because of how she's utilized. It's been years since the events of the original story happened, so the motivations of the original books don't have as much of a place. Alice has already lived that, and from the sounds of it, more. What's interesting is that the Vorpal sword isn't used to kill the Jabberwocky, but to trap it in this version. It's a different play on it, but it works. So it makes me then wonder, like, can you actually kill the Jabberwocky? Because, like, in series 2 of the main show, obviously, if I'm saying series 2, it's gotta be the main show, because the first, like, the spin-off only lasted one series. But in the main show, in series 2, there's a part where we meet Jack, the Giant Slayer, and she says, because in this version, Jack is Jacqueline, so she, and she says that she slayed a Jabberwocky in Wonderland. So I don't know if maybe she just said she slayed it, because like the Jabberwocky represents fear and like instills fear into people in this. So I don't know, can you actually kill the Jabberwocky? I don't know. One of the things that made me go, wait, what? In the show is that they had a version of the Forest of Forgetting. That's another thing that's frequently, well, it's forgotten in these adaptations. And the way they did it worked really well for the story. Instead of just forgetting your name, you start to forget everything about yourself and everything else. And eventually, you literally become a part of the forest. Like, you turn into a tree. Unless somebody is able to snap you out of it. But that's really hard to do, because if they're also there, then they're forgetting themselves and everything about themselves and everything else. So it's it was really clever the way that they did it all. But yeah. But this part is it's getting kind of longer than I thought it was gonna be. So I'm gonna shift to the parent show really quick. Like already said, the Hatter is in it. His hat is a fun thing. It's another way to get to Wonderland, and not just Wonderland, but many realms of story. It's like the hat takes you to what I see as a parallel to the Hall of Doors. In the book, we don't know what those doors take you to, so it's completely possible that they take you to other realms of story. So that was a pretty cool take on it. There are fun nods to the original books in both shows. Mushrooms come up various times. Storybrick's dive bar is called the Rabbit Hole. And when dealing with Wonderland people, we get various chess and card references. Oh, and at one point, Emma has arrested Will in the main show. And this is after the spinoff is over. He's drunkenly broken into the library, and Belle finds him in the morning, just, cuddling up with a copy of Alice in Wonderland. And he's ripped out a page from the book that has the Red Queen. Will's in the holding cell, and he's given a Pop-Tart for a meal. Now, I don't know if raspberry is a flavor of Pop-Tart, but I'm gonna pretend it is. And in my own little headcanon, it is the flavor of Pop-Tart that he's been given, because, well, the knave of tarts is still in the tarts. Do I spend too much time thinking about these things sometimes? Maybe, but that's neither here nor there. There's so much more I could say, but I've spent a lot of time on this entry, so I'm gonna wrap it up by saying that for the most part, I love the shows. I randomly rewatch them. They make me happy. Check them out. But we should probably jump over to the sheep shop for another couple of Tide entries. There may be a few more of those in this video. So for our first one, tied at number 7, we have the 1972 version. Considering how much time I spent on the last entry, it's probably a good thing I don't have a lot to say about this one or the one it's tied with. This one was an entertaining musical and mostly accurate to the first book. Like, they actually included some smaller details, such as after the caucus race, they actually hand out prizes. Cool. Also, we see a Hall of Doors after the Tea Party, like in the book. Also, Wick, instead of the Queen of Hearts getting upset by the Cheshire Cat during the croquet match, we see the King of Hearts get Nancy about him. Usually, they show the Queen, but it's the King that's the one that really gets upset in the book. So then the Queen wants the cat beheaded and yada yada. So it was awesome. Like, I know there's smaller details, but like, these things are often completely overlooked or they're altered in some way. So it made me really happy to see them actually included and not modified. And another thing, oh, oh, the White Rabbit finally doesn't look creepy. He's not a creepy character. We don't need to make him look creepy or be creepy. So this one was really good in my opinion. We stare at an egg in the shop, and suddenly Humpty Dumpty shows up, and he has our second entry for the number 7 slot, the 1933 adaptation. So this one, it was funded by the NRA, I guess. Like, it was a Paramount production, but with the NRA, which made me go, what? It's like with Edison. Apparently they were producing movies too. I honestly was half expecting a gun-toting Alice a la Annie Oakley when I saw that. I didn't really know what I was getting myself into when I saw that it was the NRA. But there was no Annie Oakley Alice. Once we get into the story, it's really accurate. This version did another one of those things where they like have a bit of setup of things that she sees in the real world to what she sees in Wonderland. Like there's a turtle in a tank of water that she interacts with a bit, and there's the chess set, and she puts an eggshell back together after eating an egg. Like little things. They do jumble sections of the books, so we start with sections of Through the Looking Glass, and then go into Alice in Wonderland, and back into Through the Looking Glass. But as I've said before, right, the chapters of both are done in an episodic nature, and so shifting chapter orders, not the end of the world. I found this one really enjoyable. It's definitely worth the watch. So we leave Humpty Dumpty at his square and pass on through a forest for, what's it called? I can't remember what it's called right now. but it's my sixth pick regardless. I'm sure the name will come to me, so let's just give it time. So this one was inspired by the world of Wonderland. It's not a proper adaptation, so this is more of a how did they incorporate the references thing. I didn't know what to expect with this movie, like at all. The premise is there is a family of three kids. There's David, Alice, and Peter. They live in their own little playworld based on Neverland and Wonderland. David is the eldest, there's an accident, and he dies. And this event sends the family into a tailspin. Now, if I ever get around to reading Peter Pan, I'll dive into that side of references, but since I haven't, and this isn't about Barry's story, I'm just focusing on the Wonderland stuff. There's this interesting blending between what's actually happening and how the kids see things through their pretend play filter. Like they see their aunt as, and they call her the Red Queen at the beginning. She even does the whole speak when you're spoken to line. And Peter and Alice go on a journey to London, like actually not pretend. And they unknowingly meet their grandfather, who he's a little mad. Definitely a representative of the Mad Hatter in this. And that's without them having to play pretend for that. And he gives the good old why is a raven like a writing desk line. But then there's other facets to their London trip that have more to do with the Peter Pan side rather than, excuse me, rather than the Alice in Wonderland side. So I can't really get into that. But like, it was just interesting to see how both reality and the fantastical were blended together. Even more so with the aunt, though. Because like, when the three kids are thinking of her as the Red Queen, they also combine her with the Queen of Hearts with some things. Like David has the Red Queen chess piece from their set, and he's like, off with your head. And after David dies, though, the aunt really does embody the Red Queen from Through the Looking Glass. I said way back in part 1 and earlier in this video that the Red Queen isn't a villain. Like, she actually tells Alice, like, she gives her advice, she gives her help. To become a queen, you need to cross the board. Once you have, you've done it. Like, then when Alice is crossed, the red and white queens give her some pointers about how to be a queen, right? That's what their aunt does with Alice in the real world. Sort of. After David dies, she starts to show Alice how to be a proper lady. This is important because the mom's side of the family is upper class and white, while dad's side of the family is black. He has a history of gambling. His brother is, we'll call him untoward, um, for how they would see things. They're not on the right side of the law. So this is an interracial family, but not just an interracial family, but it is a blending of classes. And the mom's family has done what they think they've needed to help the father, like the dad, become more respectable in their eyes and be worthy of being with the mom. So this is set in Victorian England. So for Alice to have upward mobility in that society, like the upper class society, which she seems to want, she's gonna need a lot of help. And her mom doesn't seem interested in that, so her aunt helps her. I mean, the aunt doesn't always use the best language. Again, they view the dad's side of the family as, untoward. And she doesn't refer to the dad in the best ways. Like, and she says that, like, Alice must want to be raised in a civilized manner, which I mean, ugh. But looking at the general perceptions of people, especially in the upper classes, especially at that time, that language is true to form. I mean, I'm not saying it's ethically correct, but it did happen, and we can't pretend that it didn't. But I did find how they handled things with Alice and her aunt to be a well thought out way to show that aspect of the book and tie it into the realities of that time while contrasting Alice's life before her death. Because at this point of the movie, Alice is trying to tether herself to the real world more than the world of play that she's been living in now that David is dead. She's just like, I'm going to pretend that that never happened. I'm going to pretend this stuff never existed. And I need to grow up, which is a little more Peter Pan side than the Alice side. So I won't dive into that more until I do a Peter Pan one. But yeah, it's just, it was really, I thought that it was really well done, showing all those like complex things that are going on in their lives and whatnot. Like it was good. There were other neat ways that the kids' fantasy world intersected with reality in their eyes. In the aftermath of the tragedy, Rose starts to drink, and Alice catches her with the bottle, and later she ends up getting into the booze, and when she does, it has a drinking label on it. So Alice does that. Like, she just downs it. I don't remember what kind of alcohol it is. I didn't notice. But she takes like a good few gulps of it. And so then to her mind's eye, she shrinks down. There's so many things, and I'm running short on time. Oh, so I'm gonna finish this section with the name. What was the name? Because we're the name, the name, the name, the name. Come away from 2020. Not everything was a dumpster fire that year, and now the Red Knight comes charging at us with 1998's Through the Looking Glass in 5th position. In this one, the sole focus was on Through the Looking Glass, as the name might suggest. Now, I do have one big criticism for this version. There's a kid named Alice. She's being read a story by Kate Beckinsale's character. But it's not the kid that's being shown as Alice as we watch the story unfold. No, it's Kate Beckinsale instead. Now, I think Kate Becks is awesome, right? Don't get me wrong. However, there's a kid named Alice. Why isn't she portraying Alice with Beckinsale narrating, right? Like, the kid looks to be around the proper age for the book's character. So why? Why? It's pretty accurate to the events of the book. But as per usual, things got cut out, like the Forest of Forgetting, and well, we had some of the Lion and the Unicorn, they skipped the fight, and there were a few other things as well. Ugh, it's a sad truth. No adaptation can include absolutely everything. Though I would watch that if it did. That would be bitchin'. There's a fun thing they did with the Tweedles. They had them perform the walrus and the caterpillar, as happens in the book. But the way they styled it was like a beach montage in a 90s Britpop music video. I was laughing my ass off. There was something different about this adaptation in comparison to other Looking Glass adaptations, though. There was a section that was focused solely on a wasp. And this, it came out of left field to me. I was going like, oh my god, did I miss a chapter? Did, pages stick together? What? What's going on? Nope. Turns out that there was a lost chapter that had been found at some point, and they decided to include it in this movie. So that was really cool. Very entertaining, and again, aside from the bits that were cut out, it was really accurate, and they included a lost chapter. So, where they may have missed out on some accuracy points, they get some of them back because of that specific thing. Could you base a book report off of this? No. But it does get really close. The White Knight has successfully escorted us through to the next movie, which is tied at 3rd place with another movie. It did say there were going to be a few ties. The first one is the 99 adaptation. This one includes parts from both books and is a collaboration with Jim frickin' Henson. There's perfect puppetry, and it's so much fun. And not just that, but it has an all-star cast. We have Whoopi Goldberg, Robbie Coltrane, Ben Kingsley, Christopher Lloyd, Miranda Richardson, Martin Short, Gene Wilder, George Wendt, Sheila Hancock. Oh my god! Star-studded cast. In this one, there are a few additions, like White Rabbit's house. Alice is looking around, picks up a bottle off from the shelf, and her reflection in the mirror freezes. She moves around a little, puts the bottle back, and her reflection starts moving again. I'll bet Lewis Carroll was kicking himself in his grave for not including that detail, 'cause that was clever as fuck. And during the trial, we get this fun little tidbit.
Try it again on soprano sax.
It's a good touch of absurdity that actually builds on the world without taking anything away from it. Like, overall, this entry was charming and entertaining. I mean, it's a Jim Henson collab. What'd you expect? But it was very accurate. Despite the couple of little things, it was very accurate while adding fun little tidbits that accentuated the world. We are now fully crammed, but the white and red queens, they do have some tips for us. And for that, they want us to look at Disney's 1951 adaptation for our other third place piece. Of any of the adaptations in these 3 videos, this is probably the one most people are the most familiar with. And that's including me. It's the one I grew up with. Like, this movie is a part of my official DVD collection. It's another mashup of both books, with a heavy lean to Alice in Wonderland rather than Through the Looking Glass. One of the few times that that's not the case, though, is with the Tweedle twins. They recite Old Father William in the movie, where in the book that happens with the caterpillar. And they, of course, do a rendition of The Walrus and the Carpenter in a fun sequence. But this isn't weird. Like, for most adaptations, if something is shifted from one book to the other, it's from Looking Glass to Alice in Wonderland, like the Unbirthday stuff, right? That in the books was with Humpty Dumpty in the second book. But he was cut out, and so that was all moved to the tea party bit with the Hatter and the Hare. But I do think the biggest change is that the trial has nothing to do with stolen hearts. It has more to do with the fact that the Queen of Hearts was embarrassed. Yes, that does fit the character, but at the same time, the trial was for a nonsensical reason, adding to the strangeness of the trial and fitting with the overall vibe of Wonderland. The reason in the movie makes sense for a crazed royal, but Wonderland is a place of things that don't make sense. So, after having read the story, fit with like the character's temperament, but didn't fit with the place. And that made me a little sad. But I mean, again, this movie was my first intro to Wonderland, so it's always going to have a special place in the heart. All things considered, it's fairly accurate, even though they mashed things together, but the thing that puts it over the edge is that it's really entertaining, which isn't surprising. I mean, this is a Disney movie from the Disney era, like when Walt Disney was still alive, so like, yeah. But we have now finished our lessons with the queens, and can now host our own feast, featuring the number 1 slot, or rather 2 entries, tied for number 1. But before we get into that, shameless self-plug time! I have a membership. Included in memberships ranging from $1 to $10 are updates on my work, behind-the-scenes looks into my thoughts and processes, and for certain tiers, exclusive content like companion videos to what I put out publicly. I am still deciding what the companion video for this is going to be, but there will be something. There will be something. So just head on over to my Buy Me a Coffee page and sign up. The link will be in the description below. Back to the feast! In equal first position, we have Sci-Fi Channel's 2009 Alice and the 1985 adaptations. Sci-Fi's Alice is a 2-part special, with the Wonderland stuff set 150 years after the original stories take place. So it's not a clear-cut adaptation, but something based off the world of Wonderland. And, it's got people you may have heard of, Matt Frewer, Kathy Bates, Tim frickin' Curry! In this, the original Alice brought down the House of Cards when she was there 150 years ago. And then Wonderland kind of turned into this nitty-gritty place, and any of the characters that were happy-go-lucky or at least more easygoing or laid back in the books, because they seem to be the same people. They are more serious and willing to throw down at the drop of a glove. But I don't know if they're all supposed to be the exact same people. I mean, it's been 150 years, but we don't know the lifespans of the Wonderlandians. Wonderlandites? Wonderlanders. But based on one of the characters, I don't think that they're the exact same people. I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, there are people in many of the same positions, with the same titles, at the very least. This new Alice, the people call her the Alice of Legend, gets swept up in everything when her boyfriend Jack, I wonder who he's supposed to be. He gets kidnapped, and she follows them through the looking glass / rabbit hole combo portal thing. Turns out there's a MacGuffin. Everybody wants this damn ring that's come into Alice's possession. There's a resistant movement against the Hearts, with one of the bigwigs being the Dodo, played by Tim Curry. And they want it, but so does the Hart family themselves, and this ring is important because it's actually the stone of Wonderland, and it controls the portal to the looking glass that takes them between Wonderland and the human world, right? So that's what's happening. That's like the big thing, and Alice just wants to find Jack and get home, and everybody wants to find Alice because she's got the ring, and this whole big thing. There are so many fun little nods to the books. Like Jack gives Alice's mum, who's named Carol, a bouquet of white roses, but he saves a red rose for Alice. Humans are called oysters by the Wonderlanders, and they're brought to their world so their pearls can be collected by the walrus and the carpenter. And the pearls, their emotions, and they're siphoned off from humans. And they're kind of like drugs for the Wonderlanders. So I guess that specific thing's not fun, but like it's an inventive way of interpreting it. And the Hearts, as in the suit of cards, they run things, including this big casino, and like their guards are called suits. I don't know why that tickles me so much, but it does. And then one of my favorite things, there are these flying scooters. I love those. Like it's so hilarious. I don't know why it makes me feel it tickles me. It just tickles me. And that's just a few of those little nods to the smaller details of the books. And then with the characters, well, I already mentioned Dodo, and in the book, he is thought of as an authority figure, right? And in the movie, he's looked on as an expert within the resistance. So he's pretty much the same character, just twisted to the dystopian setting. Then there's the White Knight. He's adorably bumbly, and the character is an inventor like in the book. However, this is the character that makes me wonder if the characters are the originals or not. Because he was actually the squire of who I'm presuming was the original White Knight of the chess court from the story, from the book, right? But this former squire has taken on the moniker now as he is the last of all of the chess court. So clearly, some of them have a long lifespan. He was a squire. I'm blanking on the age range of squires. But, like, it's been 150 years, so that plus 150, he has a long lifespan. But do all people or species or whatever in Wonderland have that long lifespan? That's the question. And if they do, bam! Some of them have great skincare routines. Like, look at the Hatter! If that's the original Hatter from when the original Alice came to Wonderland, well, that's something since, the current White Knight, he's aged quite a lot. Like certain other versions, the Hatter has more of a pronounced relationship with Alice than most other people. Why not somebody else? Like, seriously. And no, the Hatter doesn't go by Jack in the human world. Jack is a very different person. They choose to make the Hatter her guide through Wonderland, though. So there's that. So if you didn't know, some people call Jacks from a deck of cards knaves. So guess what? His name may be Jack, but he's the knave of hearts. And that ring I was talking about earlier? Well, it may not have been tarts, but guess who stole it? The knave of hearts. I could go on longer for this one, but there's one more movie I need to talk about. So, I'll leave this part as, holy shit, this one was fucking amazing! Watch it. Watch it. Of course, after you finish this video. But watch it. 2 parts. Seriously, out of the 31 versions I watched, this one got the closest to being better than the books, even though it wasn't a true blue adaptation. Like, I debated putting it there. That's how good it was. So I'm going to stop gushing over that one now. I'm going to talk about the last entry it's tied with, the 1985 version. It's a musical and a proper adaptations of the books rather than being based on the world of Wonderland. And yes, I said books. It's a mashup of both of them. It's another one with an amazing cast. Like, it has some big names from back in the day, like Carol Channing, Sally Struthers, Sammy Davis Jr. again, only not as Cheshire, Telly Savalas, Ernest Borgnine, Ringo Starr, and a name that more people might recognize nowadays, John frickin' Stamos. And that's just some of them. Like, it was a stellar cast for the day. Here, dear little Alice wants to go to grown-up tea, but isn't allowed, and so in Wonderland, she's trying to become a queen, and then maybe she'll be allowed at tea. So her big motivation is closer to the Looking Glass one, which is different than most other Combo Alice movies. Typically, she'd rather get to the garden and what's going on there. Quickly, they cut out the caucus race, but kept in the mouse's tail, which, wow, haven't mentioned that in a long time. If you remember, Mouse gives a little history lesson, and they just turned that into a song, and that was cool. But one weird thing is that they cut out all the mushroom stuff. They keep the drink and food detail in, so why not the mushrooms? I do not know. One thing that made me sad was they cut out the lobster quadrille entirely, and they replaced it with a song entitled Nonsense. I'm not saying that the song was bad, further from, but they could have included the quadrille. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. They included the fight between the lion and the unicorn. And something that pretty much always gets cut out, there is a part where the Red Queen and Alice are running, and even though they're running at speed, they don't make much headway. It's like traveling in North America. Oh yeah, we've been driving for 6 hours. We started here, and now we're here. Okay. But it made me really happy to see both of those things included. They did make it so that the Jabberwocky is an actual thing rather than just a poem, and it's chasing her all throughout Wonderland. As we've already seen, this isn't the first time that's happened, so fine. They wove it throughout the movie, though, and into the actual plot. So that was different to other adaptations. I mean, some of them do have it as an actual part of the plot, and some is just a little blip. In order for her to get home, she has to defeat the Jabberwocky. And so the big showdown is at the feast at the end, when she's become a queen with all the characters, regardless of which book they were from, which makes sense for this one. It's been smuggled in as a gift for Alice, and she has to face it, and so therefore, her fears. By overcoming her fears, she stops believing in them, and therefore the Jabberwocky, which kills it. I don't know, maybe it's part fairy? And she gets to go home and finally be included in grown-up tea. While this one made tweaks and changes, it was still really accurate to the books, even if not 100%. Most of the changes made sense, and it was one of those things that it may be 3 hours long. I mean, technically, it was aired as a 2-part TV special back in the day, but it didn't feel like that the whole time watching it. And when that happens, you know it's a good time. With that, the feast is over, and we're back in our living rooms. In the next page versus screen, we'll be taking a look at, well, not sure yet. I still have to make a selection and then dive into it. But before I sign off, did you know that there are some missing verses to Twinkle Twinkle Little Bat? Well, there are. And in true Alice in Wonderland fashion, there should be a poem that's recited. So, let's do this. Twinkle, twinkle, little light, how I wonder when you'll strike. Just below the vid you fly, like a tea tray in the sky. Twinkle, twinkle, hit subscribe, as I hope you like my vibe. When you've done that, ring the bell to know the next one's out as well. Thank you. Until next time, pals. Blessed be. To include both Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. And I should do that opposite, shouldn't I? Hey, Brain. It's time for water. Boston, Mass. 2, 1, 3, 4. Sheep shock, sheep shock, sheep shock, sheep shock. One of the wigwings. One of the wigwings. Off with the heads. first adaptation to include. Did it get included? Yeah. They're coming to take me away. Hee hee ha ha. Oh, it's a funny ha. My life is beautiful all the time. Well, what I liked about this one was that it was the first one to ever include both Alice in Wonderland and Alice Through the Looking Glass. Very entertaining. Damn it, battery, why can't you last longer? Get back to a regularly scheduled programming. Oh, she's sick that she's psycho. Me. What the fuck is wrong with my brain? By checking out the universe of Once a Month, and Yum Tubby Shubby I should be motivation enough. Why am I scrolling with the keypad? I have the mouse right fucking here. Okay, moving on.